Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. If you're having a hard time with this audio, put it down in the comments. I'm trying this new speaker. I used it last time. I think I've got it figured out, but if you don't like it, just let me know. I might go back to what I was doing before. Although several people said it was echoey, so I'm trying to avoid that. You got to remember, this is an automotive channel, not an audio video recording channel, so I'm not the best at this, nor will I ever be, just to let you know. So there's disappointments. Anyway, today's video has to do with this. It's really two tests, but I'm going to give you this. It's really a dual plane versus a single plane dyno test. And I know you're like, well, I've seen this before, blah, blah, blah. You're right, but I'm going to show you two examples because it's not always what you think. You can have the same cubic inch size, about the same compression ratio, and you can have two totally different results. The other thing I'm going to show you in this video, and this is really out there if you haven't seen it before, is testing a Dominator carburetor, so a 4500, on a dual plane intake manifold. I've done this before, but this might be the first time several of you have seen it. The results don't always go, and I'll go through all that in this video as well. Before I start this, any of the pictures or anything that you see, if you're a channel member, it's put into that the link I sent you. If you don't know what a channel member is, I'll explain more in the video later, like towards the end. It's not the same as a subscriber. It actually costs money. So anyway, let's get to it. A couple weeks ago, went down to see Bob. You might know him from Old Man's Garage. Bob McVeigh, he has a dyno shop, and we had tested a 406 small block Chevy. And we had done the last week's video that you probably watched, because a lot of you did, and thank you for that. We tested different cylinder heads. Well, at the very end, we tested some manifolds as well. We really just tested two, but we also threw that Dominator on there to go with it. So here's the rundown of the engine. It came from Nick from DZ Performance. You can subscribe to his channel. It's a 406. It's about the most generic thing you could have. It's got a stock block, stock crank. It does have a set of Summit forged rods, and it's got a set of Speed Pro Hypertetic dished pistons. They're factory replacements. They're 4 eyebrow reliefs. They're nothing fancy at all. It does have a hydraulic roller that Nick got from Lenati Performance. It's a custom ground deal. It's a 235, 247. That's at 50 thousandths. And that's intake and exhaust. And it's on a 108 lobe separation, 540 lift on intake, 560 on exhaust. The heads up top for this test was the Trick Flow 230cc fully CNC ported heads. And these were, Bob was nice enough to let me borrow them so that we could do testing with them. It's just how it goes. Sometimes I get lucky. And if you remember from the last video, before you think, well, that's really mismatched for this combination, it made 3 more horsepower than the 180 head that was smaller, which is probably better for that combination, you would think. It made 2 foot-pounds more of torque, and it actually made more torque at the lower RPM. So, even though it sounds like it wouldn't belong, it does. But on this particular test, we had a little bit of time, and the intake that was used on top was an Edelbrock Performer RPM. It's not even the air gap design. It's just your basic one. Anyway, first thing I said, well, let's just try this, is put a Dominator carburetor on top of it. Now, the Dominator is the one that Bob had, and it's a 4500 flange. That's the Dominator, but it's a 1050. And to get it to fit on the dual plane, what we did was we simply used a HVH adapter, and that's what you'll see when I do that test. Now, that's pretty much runs down the basics of the combination. When we tested the single plane manifold, the single plane manifold that we used was from Trick Flow R intake. It's a single plane manifold. It's pretty tall. It's a nice piece. It's been tested before, and you'll see this in the results as well in this video. So there's your combinations. Let's just get to the results, because I know that's what you're dying to see. So let me start off by showing you just the differences in power between the dual plane and the single plane. We'll just show that first. Okay, so I know this is probably not the easiest thing to read. It looks pretty dark and light gray, so apologize for that. So I'll read what the numbers are. What we have is 531 horsepower and 548 foot-pounds of torque with the Edelbrock Performer RPM. With the Trick Flow R, you had 553 horsepower and 539 foot-pounds of torque. So if you you can kind of tell in the graph if you zoom in real close, like on your computer or maybe even on your phone, you could see the light gray lines and you could tell the differences. But pretty much it's what you'd expect. The lower RPM favors the dual plane and the higher RPM favors the single plane. The interesting part is that it gained so much. So if you look at the total gains, it looks like it gained 22 horsepower from the single plane manifold, and it lost 9 foot-pounds of torque, which is a little strange. Like I said, I'm not used to seeing that, to lose that much torque. Usually they make about the same, they just kind of shift it. It's giving up one to the other. Now, I want to kind of iterate this part too. If you see this and you're thinking, well, you're going to be faster on the track with the dual plane, you're incorrect. The dual plane will feel fantastic on the street because you look, it's like almost 30 foot-pounds of torque at the lower RPM. This is going to feel so much faster until you go to the track. You got a 4,000 stall or something, even a 4,500 stall, even better. That single plane is just going to run away from you. I've seen it happen over and over and over. And even though you're like, no, torque wins, not the low RPM torque, not in a drag race. But maybe in a circle track, this would be a different situation. But street driving, that dual plane would feel better. On the actual performance on the track, it's the single plane. Okay, as you could tell, it does much like you would think would happen with whenever you have a single plane versus a dual plane. The dual plane obviously makes way more torque and horsepower at the lower RPMs, about 4,000 down or whatnot. However, above that, that single plane really carries it. And you would think, well, duh, this just makes sense. It happens all the time. Why are you even sharing this? This is no-brainer. Because I have tested this before. If you're new to my channel, you may not know this, but I used to have a 406 small block Chevy Dyno mule that I just tested a bunch of stuff on. Now, it was a bit more radical than Nick's. So it was 11.5 to 1 or 11.2 to 1. And it had a bunch of different heads. AFR 227s, the ProMax 235s, ProMax 215s, the AFR Enforcer 195s. It had a bunch of intakes used as well, just about every Hurricane, the Trick Flow intake, the Elderbrock 2892, the Super Victor manifold, the Victor Junior manifold, the Performer RPM, also with the divider cutout, 3 different versions of the Hurricane, the Team G, the Torque Link, 3 different tunnel rams, the Street Ram, the Victor Ram, and the Holley Pro Dominator. Also, you had the Holley 300 125 or 325, the Holley 300 110. Point being, it's tested a ton of intakes on that combination. One of them was the same intake we used for this one that what I did with Bob, this Trick Flow R. Now, I didn't think it was that good because in previous testing with that Trick Flow R intake, I'm going to show you this, but when that particular combination, which was a solid roller and spun more RPM, with the Performer RPM, exactly like what we ran with Nick Steel, it made 552 horsepower with an AFR Enforcer heads and 520 foot-pounds of torque. That's the dual plane. But when we switched to the single plane, it made 554 horsepower and 520 foot-pounds of torque. So it only gained 2 horsepower and 2 foot-pounds of torque, or the same torque. That's all it did. So I really thought, well, that's kind of a pooch if you're asking me. So when we tested on Bob's deal, this is the reason why you can't just use testing like this. You've got to do multiple tests to see if it actually makes a difference. But on Bob's deal, when we went from that, as you just saw in the charts, we went from 535 horsepower to 553. It was a huge gain. So it almost feels like it should be the opposite because in my dyno mule, it's far more radical. So I would have expected to see a bigger gain switching to the single plane, that Trick Flow R, but I didn't. However, on this lower RPM hydraulic roller deal, it gained more than it did with the solid roller. Goes against conventional wisdom, right? Just a bit different. However, I do want to share this. Thanks for watching because I'm going to show you this little thing. And I told Bob this, and we didn't do it, but it would have worked. One of the things we tried on that Trick Flow R intake, and none of the others, not at Bob's, I did this at Dunsworth, is this. We had dynoed it, and at this point, it had my ProMax 235 CNC heads on it with my port design. And we dynoed it just like that. And the port match sucked. And what I mean by that is I hadn't port matched the intake at all, but what would happen is the head port would be like this, all right? and this would be the intake port. So if it's perfectly matched, you know, they would come in directly like this, right? No. The Trick Flow R intake, the way it's set like this. So even though it had the same dimensions, it's set high. So you're like, so? That means the air, the roof is the worst part to have a mismatch, not the floor or the roof. So what happened is, I could almost see the blue imprint of the gasket on the top. So how do you fix that? Well, what we did is we were dynoing at Dunsworth. And I said, Gary, that's the name, Gary is his first name. I said, hey, Gary, can you take the intake and just mill it down on the sides? Let's just mill off. And I think we milled off 60. So what it did is, here's your head again. It went from sitting here, because we milled it off, it could sit back to here. That's all it was done. And it gained 15 horsepower. Or sorry, 12 horsepower. I'm showing you the chart, hopefully, as I'm talking. So you can see that. That's one little tip. So if you have that intake and it doesn't look like it fits right, you don't have to get out a grinder or nothing. You need to send it to a machine shop and have it mill it down, and it will fit perfectly on that. I wish we had done that at Bob's, but we didn't, because that intake is used on Addie's car. So we didn't want to mess up any of her alignment and whatnot. So anyway, in case you're wondering, you can do that. So that wraps up the dual plane versus single plane. Now for the part you're really interested in, what's about this Dominator? So here, let me explain. When you first see a Dominator on the dual plane, you would think, as I did, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. There's no way this will work. This is stupid. However, I have tested this, and you please go back and watch some of the videos I've done before where I have tested it. So I had an AFR dual plane intake manifold, and this is the first time to try it, just because the internet said. So I had some of my commenters like, why don't you try that? And I was like, why not? I've done other stupid stuff. Let's just add it to the list. What could happen? So HVH adapter, put it on that AFR dual plane, put the Dominator at top, gained everywhere. Now this is a 1050 Dominator versus a 1000 CFM 4150 carburetor. So the CFM difference is only 50 CFM by what they claim. Really doesn't matter, because neither one of the engines, whether Bob's or even my 406 that I use for testing, neither one could consume that much air. So the CFM is almost irrelevant, but decides to say it's big enough. It gained everywhere. I would never in a million of years thought that that would happen, because to me it looks absolutely stupid, but it worked over the entire band. Now I don't drag them down as low as what Bob does in the RPM range, but from pretty much from 4,000 on, it was a win. Shocking. So since then, I have tested it on multiple combinations. I've tested on an LS. I've tested on a big block Chevy. I've tested on a small block Ford. And then I tested it at Bob's. Before I get to the one at Bob's, let me go ahead and tell you. Small block Chevy on the Dyno Mule I had, every time I had tried it, it worked. And it gained power, with one exception where it made the same power. Gary Dunsworth at Dunsworth Machine, he had a circle track engine that was on the dyno. These are what they call their B mods. Anyway, they are pretty tightly regulated engines. They're a 350 engine. If they're lucky, they're going to make 400 horsepower. If they're lucky, usually they make 370-ish, because usually they're running on a 2-barrel. So they run a Performer EPS manifold. They've got cast iron heads. They've got a flat tappet camshaft. It is not fancy at all. And I said, truly the thing made 370. So I said, you know what? Can you try this on there? I just want to see on the lower RPM, low power deal if it'll make any difference. It didn't gain anything and it didn't lose anything. It just made the same. That was the only one on the small block Chevy up till Bob's where I've been like, it made at least the same, but usually it gains. Tried it on the LS, total loss. Lost everywhere. It was a failure. On the big block Chevy, gained. We did that on the same engine that we took to Bob's about a year ago, the 496, and we put it on a dual plane. Gained everywhere like it did on the small block Chevy. Fantastic. Tried it on the small block Ford, failed. It did not like that either. Now, it could be because of the Ford design versus the Chevy design. Chevys have a pair of runners, so your two intake ports are like this. But the Ford has individual ones, same as the LS, and maybe that's why it sucked. But it didn't work on the dual planes on those. So here we are at Bob's now. So here's what the results did. As you could tell by the sound of the dyno pull, it sounds like crap. That's because it took some carburetor tuning just to get it where it right. You actually had to add quite a bit of jet to get it where it should be. It was too lean. That's why I was doing that weird stumble stuff when I was rolling in. Anywho, after getting that, this is the results we got left with. It didn't make more torque. It didn't make more horsepower. What it did make was more low RPM torque, which, and again, that's a little strange, but it did. So there's your results. So after looking at that, there are a couple things I need to point out. Before, when I was using my HVH adapter, I had an older one. And if you happen to watch this video and you see someone selling one of the older versions, please contact me at winegardenracing@gmail.com because I really would like to have another one back. Because what had happened is a viewer had sent me one to test with, and all the Dominator testing that I used was that adapter. It looks like what I'm hopefully showing as I'm talking. That one's what was used, and it worked great. If you get a new one right now, it doesn't look like it. It looks like this. Anyway, that one, I don't think it works as well. That's the same one that Bob has. So maybe that's some of the difference, but even at that, if you notice, it still did better at the lower RPM, which goes against conventional wisdom because you shouldn't need more air there. It's just strange, but oddly true. So anyway, I don't know. I can't say 100% certain it doesn't work or doesn't work. I just know I've tested it enough. It's worth a shot if you happen to be on the dyno. Now, one of the things I can already feel the comments coming is, well, that's the dyno, that's not how it drives. I would like to try it at some point. So if you watch my channel, you know that my son has a Nova that we've been putting together. It's drivable now. It actually has an engine that only makes 425 horsepower. I have thought about putting a Dominator on it with that adapter just to see how it drives, because it drives like a smooth candle now. It's just boring almost. So if it drove worse with the Dominator, then I could answer that question. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll put it on the chassis down and also test it to see how it does on that part. But there you go. Guys, thanks for sticking around for this video. Hopefully you got something out of it. But appreciate all of you that have watched. As far as the channel membership thing, there's a link that's going to be in the description for this video. If you click on that, you can purchase it. What do you get? When I dyno and I have time, so it doesn't always work out, and I'm sorry for that, channel members. Sometimes I can give you updates right away, and sometimes I can't. But typically, I'll be texting you updates on how the engine's going and what's happening before videos ever drop. If you don't become a channel member, it all ends up on YouTube anyway. But you get that, but also you get sent a link. This is probably the most important part, because everything that you saw here as far as the dyno graphs, flow sheets, all the other stuff from any of the tests are in the link that gets sent to the channel members, so you can actually scroll on it and look at it any time. When the cam challenge is getting ready to come up, they'll have all their cam cards in there. So will anybody that donated also to the cam challenge, but they get to see all that stuff as well. They will get to see the dyno results from the cam challenge before anybody else for sure, because I'll drop it in their folder first. So anyway, that's it. Yeah, it's kind of expensive. Don't think I'm not going to put it all on YouTube. Everything makes it on YouTube. So guys, thanks for watching. Remember, I'm no Superman. I did race Superboy. I don't port cast iron heads. You guys take care.